Welcome to this week's edition of your weekly news from the Socialist Monarchy of Sweden. I'm your host Daniel, and during this broadcast I will give you the latest happenings from Swedish society, truly the epitome of progress in this world. What follows here are news that took place between the 28th of November and the 4th of December in chronological order. Two black 13-year-olds wearing hooded shirts held up a woman at gunpoint at a school in the Stockholm suburb of Tensta and made off with her purse and her cell phone. The purse was later found in another area, but the police have no leads on the cell phone or the perpetrators. Back in August, three immigrant men in their late teens, one of whom was a Somali, battered and raped a woman in the forests outside the Stockholm suburb of Älvsjö. They had discovered her walking around, seemingly lost and in an inebriated state. Then they assaulted her, tore off her clothes, punched her in the face repeatedly, and raped her vaginally against a rock. They are now being prosecuted, but since they're minors, they will most likely only be sentenced to a couple of months in secure youth care, like the others who committed the same crime. A castle in a rural idyll outside of Ludvika is now being turned into refugee quarters for 83 asylum seekers. Letting a large number of so-called refugees settle in a rural area almost always has disastrous consequences for the surrounding area, with plenty of shoplifting, and villagers are worried the same will happen to them. A 39-year-old asylum seeker from Iraq spat a 60-year-old nurse in the face after he was forced to wait for 30 minutes for her to treat his diabetes. She reported him to the police, and now he's been sentenced to a minimal fine for harassment. A 17-year-old Muslim woman was refused a summer job at a care facility in Tensta because she refused to shake the hands of men in accordance with her religion. Because of this, she was instead offered another job in a municipality where this wouldn't be a problem. But since she felt her religious rights had been violated, she is now suing both the care facility and the municipality for damages. A 60-year-old known pedophile who's been sentenced to prison in the past for sexual molestation of children and who's earlier been convicted on no fewer than 90 different counts of crime during his lifetime, has now been cleared by the Social Welfare Council in Helsingborg for the adoption of a young boy. 9 out of 10 members of the council voted in favor of this, but the public at large isn't understanding at all. Swedish grocery store chain ICA has a black boy as St. Lucy in this year's Christmas catalogue. St. Lucy's Day is an important festival in Sweden, and it's customary that the role is played by a blonde woman. But apparently ICA wants to shatter traditional norms. No fewer than 4 of the children pictured are the wrong gender for their roles. A 33-year-old immigrant who owns a cafe in Upplands Väsby forced potential female employees to have sex with him, or they wouldn't get the job. He also said he would tip the underage girls for various sexual services. He's now been charged with sexual harassment. A homosexual Arabian man raped a Swedish man back in September and is now being charged for this, though the prosecutor hasn't decided yet whether to actually demand the deportation of the perpetrator if he's convicted. It's uncommon for immigrants to be deported, even if they commit heinous crimes. In a matter that reeks of welfare fraud, no fewer than 60 people were found to be registered on the same address in Norrköping. It's quite common that immigrants get their asylum applications approved, then return to their home countries and live off Swedish welfare from there. Parents in Örnsköldsvik have now been told they're not to not permitted to take pictures of the children during the St. Lucy's Day celebrations for fear they might capture the identity of illegal aliens residing in the country. The municipal school authorities in the city sent out a letter last week to all parents with a message to that effect, which has caused an outrage in alternative media. A boy listed as being 13-year-old on paper died a week ago after an altercation with a fellow resident at a home for so-called unaccompanied minors in Pajala. It's very rare that fights among actual children have lethal outcomes, but the supposed minor status of these children is often fraudulent. New directives in the city of Malmö grant illegal aliens who have been on welfare for at least 4 months the right to have a personal computer and internet access paid for by the municipality. Swedish citizens that apply for welfare to pay for basic necessities like food generally have their applications denied on the other hand. So-called unaccompanied minors are now seeking medical treatment for hair loss, something that actual children never suffer unless they've got cancer or something of that sort. Many of the supposed minors who are granted refugee status for being unaccompanied minors are later discovered to be in their 20s or even 30s. Left-wing extremists in the Stockholm suburb of Skogås vandalized roughly 2 dozen buses and called for the end to all deportation of asylum seekers. The vandalization has caused damage in the hundreds of thousands of crowns. Lesbian artist Frida Klingberg says she wants to save crab lice from extermination. She laments the fact that lots of people these days shave their pubic hair and thereby deprive these lice of their natural habitat, something that amounts to the destruction of the Earth's rainforests, according to her. For this reason, she's now launched an art project where participants are meant to collect and cultivate the lice in their pubic hair and share them with others on request. Security expert Charlie Salonius Pasternak at the Finnish Foreign Policy Institute fears that Sweden's neglect of its home defense is putting the whole Baltic Sea region in jeopardy. The last couple of decades, Sweden has almost completely dismantled its army, which Salonius comments with these words in the Institute's recent newsletter. A country that for centuries has contributed to regional stability has in less than half a decade become a devourer of stability. In the recent international PISA survey on mathematics, Sweden has fallen in test scores more than any other country during the last 10 years, and now the Swedish scores are far below the OECD average, in spite of earlier always having come up on top. Third world immigration might have something to do with this. Alexander Loveiko, working with the integration of immigrants for the municipality of Nässjö, is alarmed over racism towards Swedes among Somalis. The parents prohibit their children from seeing Swedes, and their daughters are especially penalized if they do, usually outright ostracized. Now he wants to start a youth group for Somalis in order to successfully integrate them into society. I wouldn't get my hopes up. The Swedish National Agency for Education clarified the other day that students in Sweden are allowed to keep jackets and hats on inside the classroom, as well as use their cell phones there. Many teachers feel that this has a negative impact on the teaching done, but they get no understanding from their superiors. A 50-year-old immigrant pizza shop owner in Malmö was moonlighting this last spring by breaking into the homes of elderly Swedes at night and stealing their belongings. When the police finally caught up with him, they found hundreds of stolen items in his possession. The wave of burglaries that had plagued the city ended when he was arrested, yet he claimed he was only on the way to his pizza shop the night the police caught him. A report by the County Administrative Board in the province of Norrbotten calls for more job internship, specifically aimed at newly arrived immigrants due to their high unemployment. Elina Pettersson, the woman who wrote the report, is very critical over what municipalities have done so far for immigrants. Myself, I'm critical of the discrimination against ethnic Swedes. After about 100 illicit gun shootings this year so far in the gang haven of Malmö, the police are launching an operation called Olivia, aimed at identifying the perpetrators. No new police officers have been hired in spite of the surge in violent crime, however, and no plans have been announced to clamp down on violent crime in actual force. A group of dissatisfied, unaccompanied children are petitioning Prime Minister Reinfeldt since they feel the living standard at their housing is inadequate. They demand that he gets personally involved and enforces the standards they want. Pupils at the Kvisthamra school in Norrtälje are forced to hold their Christmas celebrations in the school gym instead of in church after a decision by the principal. The Christmas carols they're meant to sing are also being rewritten to remove such words as Christmas and God. A Facebook petition has been launched by parents to protest this. Swedish residents at an elder nursing home in Malmö were often covered in dried-up excrement and had to sleep in it without the nursing staff doing anything about it. The residents brought it to their attention repeatedly to no avail. In spite of not being able to head there themselves, the residents got no help making their way to the restrooms and were pretty much told to use their beds as lavatories. That's what it's like growing old in socialist Sweden. A 28-year-old Somali and Muslim activist is now being charged for an alleged death threat against a local left-wing politician named Gun Holmberg, who was volunteering her services for immigrants. In a column last summer, she testified that she believed that Islamism was on the rise in the Somali community she worked with. 2 days later, she met with the head of one of these Somali interest organizations, who according to her police report uttered these words: "I'm a jihadi fighter. Allah has told me to kill you. You won't know when or how it will take place." And that's last week's news from Sweden.